The 12 letters that never reached Xi Jinping. What if the most powerful man in China was being warned by his own people? Not with protests, not with public defiance, but with letters. Letters that were never delivered. Over the course of a single year, 12 high-ranking officials from deep inside the party wrote messages to Xi Jinping. Some were desperate. Some were furious. Some simply wanted to be heard one last time. None of those letters made it to his hands. But what if someone else found them? Tonight, we unfold a forgotten paper trail, one that reveals the cracks in absolute power. These are the 12 letters that never reached Xi Jinping. The first letter, a warning from the inside. The envelope was pale gray, the kind usually reserved for internal memos or condolence notes. But what made it strange wasn't the paper, it was the destination scrawled in elegant, unhurried strokes. To the General Secretary, eyes only. No department. No stamp. No routing code. Just Xi Jinping. It never arrived. That letter was written by Wei Dazhong, a seasoned economic strategist who had survived 5 party reshuffles and once briefed Jiang Zemin in person. He was known as the man who could explain GDP like a bedtime story. But in March 2021, something changed. Wei had been asked to review the Belt and Road Initiative's shadow budgets, numbers that didn't appear in public reports, expenses routed through companies that technically didn't exist. The deeper he went, the more patterns emerged. Not corruption in the traditional sense. Something more subtle. Strategic misdirection. Certain provinces were being drained dry to fund projects in regions with no geopolitical logic. Empty ports in West Africa. Highways built in marshland. A desalination plant in the middle of a floodplain in Central Asia. Wei wasn't naive. He knew money was often used to buy silence. But what alarmed him was where the money seemed to lead, into subsidiaries linked to the Ministry of State Security. Why would intelligence agencies need to hide inside water infrastructure projects? He wrote his findings into a private letter, not a report. Not for review. Not for audit. A direct appeal. Dear Chairman Xi, you once said the party must remain above all temptation. But what if temptation has dressed itself in service to the state? I do not accuse you. I warn you. There are hands in your shadow, reshaping things in your name, but not in your interest. Respectfully, Wei Dazhong. The letter was sealed, passed by hand to a trusted driver, and then it vanished. 3 weeks later, Wei was quietly reassigned. No explanation. No ceremony. He now teaches economics at a provincial university in Inner Mongolia. His lectures are public, but his name never appears in official schedules. Students say he avoids eye contact when asked about Beijing. One student said he no longer says the word belt at all. The archivist who found his letter did so accidentally, inside a file labeled Security Routing Errors. It had been logged, scanned, but never opened. The envelope was still sealed. She didn't open it either. She just read the scan. She later said she kept hearing the phrase, reshaping things in your name, repeating in her head, like a riddle. That was letter 1. There were 11 more, and each one whispered a little louder. Burned before reading. The second letter never had a chance. It was written by someone only a few people in Zongnanhai even knew existed, an interpreter. Not a diplomat, not a minister, not even a formal party member. Just a language specialist, fluent in Russian, Persian, and political nuance. Her name was Lin Yue, and for more than a decade, she had been the invisible ear at the most delicate meetings. She didn't just translate words, she listened to what was never said. Tonal shifts, facial twitches, the language behind the language. In August 2020, during a rare closed-door summit between Chinese and Iranian security officials, she heard something that didn't sit right. Not the official statement, that was typical theater. What disturbed her was a joke. A whisper, really, between the Iranian intelligence chief and a PLA general. It wasn't even in Mandarin, it was in Farsi. But she understood it perfectly. They think he's in control. But the map draws itself now. It meant nothing to anyone else. But to Lin, it confirmed what she had suspected for months. Xi Jinping was no longer the sole architect of China's strategy. A shadow command was shaping narratives, alliances, and even national mythologies, using his image, but without his consent. That night, she wrote the letter. Not with accusations. With fear. Chairman Xi, I have served your words in many tongues. But I must now write my own. If the world believes you command every whisper, then every whisper that misleads becomes your legacy. You must take back your voice before others speak too loudly in it. She printed it, placed it in an envelope, and brought it to the communications drop-off box near Building 4, the one used for private courier dispatches. But the letter never left the compound. Surveillance logs show that just after she left, a man in a janitor's uniform, not employed by any known department, entered the hallway. The camera feed for that section cuts out for 7 minutes. When it resumes, the envelope is gone. 2 days later, Lin was reassigned, not outside the city, but deeper into it. She was made head of translation integrity at an unnamed bureau linked to internal speech auditing. Her job now, to ensure that every international transcript matched party tone. Colleagues say she still speaks only when necessary. She never writes anything down. But one person claims to have seen her pause while reviewing a foreign leader's quote about freedom and murmur to herself. He wouldn't have said that. Not him. Not in that way. The archivist who found the deletion log for her letter noticed something else. The system didn't show it as removed. It was marked preemptively nullified. She stared at that phrase for hours. How do you erase something before it exists? That was letter 2. The others were even harder to trace. The archivist's discovery. They called her Ghost Printer. Not to her face. Nobody used nicknames inside Archive Division 7. But behind her back, people said it with a strange kind of respect. Her real name was Zhao Lihua, and her job wasn't glamorous. She reviewed flagged metadata from classified communications, not the content, just the movement. When something was sent, where it stalled, who almost read it. She had never seen the inside of the Politburo, never spoken to a minister. Her world was timestamps, courier IDs, ink cartridge serials. But in early 2022, she noticed a pattern. 12 letters. All marked internal transmission anomaly. All directed to the same recipient, XJP. All quietly rerouted. All unopened. That kind of thing wasn't unprecedented. The party filtered tens of thousands of messages daily. But these weren't crackpot submissions or citizen pleas. These were from within mid to high-level officials, with clearance badges that didn't glitch. And the system hadn't rejected them outright. It had diverted them, like a current steering around a rock. Lihua wasn't reckless. She didn't open the letters, but she requested their metadata profiles under the guise of a routine delivery audit. That's when she saw the signature code on one of the logs, R98Z, a routing designation tied to a unit that didn't officially exist. She froze. Unit R98Z had been a rumor in party backchannels for years, supposedly a discretionary control node that redirected sensitive content for pre-approval before reaching senior leadership. Not censorship. Something deeper. Narrative filtration. She ran a batch query. All 12 letters passed through R98Z. The next morning, her workstation wouldn't turn on. She was told her terminal had been reassigned. She was moved to physical record inventory, an intentional downgrade. But she didn't stop. In the basement of Archive Tower 2, buried under thermal paper logs from the 1990s, she found a folder mislabeled as Postal Efficiency Study, Comms Delays to Zhongnanhai. It wasn't a study. It was a report, unsigned, undated, detailing exactly how the 12 letters had been intercepted, rerouted, and never delivered. Each one was marked with a phrase. Preservation without presence. Visibility denied. Command remains uninformed. And at the bottom of the report, scribbled in pen, They trust the silos more than the man. She copied the report, printed 2 versions. One she mailed to herself using an unregistered name. The other she hid, not in a safe, not in a locker, but in the most invisible place in China. A university library's abandoned thesis archive under the category Agricultural Logistics. No one would check there. Years later, a journalist in exile claimed she found the original report in a scanned database dump. Most people dismissed it as fiction. But those who worked in party logistics recognized something real in the wording, and more importantly, in what was missing. Because one of the letters Zhao tracked was dated 5 days before a major economic advisor was declared missing due to illness. And another, from the interpreter Lin Yue, the one reassigned after the Iranian summit. Li Hua never went public, but she was last seen boarding a flight to Dalian with a single bag and no return ticket. To this day, no formal case has been filed. But someone, maybe more than one, had tried to warn Xi. And someone else had made sure he never heard them. The one who regretted too late. He was never meant to write a letter. Chen Rue, Vice Minister of Environmental Strategy, had always played by the rules, not out of fear, but out of belief. He was a textbook party loyalist, educated in Tsinghua, fluent in Marxist theory, and a firm believer in collective destiny. He had met Xi Jinping once, in 2015, at a flood reconstruction site. Their handshake lasted only 3 seconds, but Chen remembered the weight of that grip for years. But beliefs change when silence starts costing lives. In the summer of 2021, Chen reviewed internal documents regarding a toxic spill in the Yunnan Basin, one that hadn't been reported publicly. Satellite images showed rapid deforestation, discoloration of major rivers, and abnormally high cancer rates among nearby villages. The official explanation: seasonal fluctuations. Chen didn't buy it. What made it worse was the discovery that emergency funds allocated to address the spill had been redirected. Not stolen. Redirected toward a real estate project in Inner Mongolia managed by a state-adjacent company with opaque ties. He raised concerns in a closed-door committee. The response was polite, measured, and final. Don't escalate. The matter is under ideological review. That phrase haunted him. He spent 2 weeks pacing, rereading past reports, reviewing images. Then, on a Sunday morning, he did something completely uncharacteristic. He wrote a letter. Longhand. Not typed. To the chairman. I do not oppose you. I fear for the gap between what you say and what reaches you. If power moves upward but information flows sideways, we are not governed by wisdom, only illusion. There are truths being paved over. And one day, even you may step on that pavement and not realize what was buried beneath it. He folded the letter, placed it inside a red dossier envelope, and gave it to his secretary with a quiet instruction. Courier drop. Priority seal. The next morning, the secretary was gone. No explanation. No replacement. Chen filed a personnel request. It was ignored. He called her phone, disconnected. Her apartment, emptied overnight. 3 days later, Chen received an envelope. Inside was no letter, just his own message, returned. Unopened. Stamped, recipient unreachable. It broke something inside him. Not his belief in the party. His belief in access. For weeks, he stopped attending meetings. He started drinking alone at night. His aides say he began collecting newspaper clippings, even from foreign outlets, something previously unthinkable for a man like him. Then, abruptly, he requested a sabbatical. Not for health, not for family. Just time to reflect. He now lives in a small coastal town, running a bookstore specializing in political philosophy. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't publish. But once, a visiting journalist found a handwritten note tucked between 2 volumes of the Analects. I was too late, not to write, but to realize he was already deaf. No signature. But the handwriting matched the original letter, the one that never made it. That was letter 4. Only 8 remained. and each one brought Xi Jinping closer to the voices he would never hear. The last letter that almost reached him. The 12th letter came closer than all the others. It was written by someone with direct, daily access to Xi Jinping's inner office. Not a minister. Not a security officer. Not even someone with a rank. It was his calligrapher. The man was known only as Shu, though that was almost certainly not his real name. His job was ceremonial: transcribe official mottos, reproduce ancient poetry in the chairman's handwriting style, prepare scrolls for diplomatic gifts. But Shu had spent more hours in Xi's private study than many party officials ever would. And in that silence, he saw everything. The fading ink bottles. The torn red folders. The small stack of discarded speeches. The sighs after calls. The long pauses in front of blank pages. He never spoke. Never asked questions. But one night, in the early spring of 2023, Shu lingered after hours. She had just left the room. On the desk, a draft of an internal address lay open, a speech that, from the looks of it, would never be delivered. It was about trust. The word appeared 6 times in the first paragraph alone. But halfway through the second, the pen strokes had changed. More hesitant. Less certain. Shu read it twice. Then he placed it face down. Later that evening, in his modest apartment, Shu took out one of the ceremonial scroll papers usually reserved for party anniversaries and began to write. To the chairman, I do not come from power. I hold no ambition. I only write the words others choose for you. But I have seen what is left out. The ink dries faster these days. The silence around you is louder. And those who shape your image no longer reflect your voice, only their interests. If I write this, and it is read by no one, then I am just a ghost with a brush. But if it reaches you, please, listen before even your silence becomes scripted. He folded the scroll not like a letter, but like a gift. Tied it with a black ribbon, a quiet breach of protocol. The next morning, he carried it in his sleeve to Zongnanhai. It wasn't unusual for him to bring new scrolls. He timed his walk perfectly, arriving just as the outer office was being cleaned, when most eyes were elsewhere. He left it on the chairman's personal reading table, inside a leather folio already filled with briefing papers. He never saw Xi open it. But someone else did. Within an hour, Shu was summoned to an administrative review, a routine reassessment of ceremonial personnel. By that afternoon, he was dismissed. No charges. No blacklist. Just a polite thank you for his service and a final paycheck deposited electronically. He left Beijing that night. Disappeared into the countryside. Some say he runs a tea house now, painting quiet landscapes for tourists. Others say he was recruited by a ghost division of archivists who specialize in preserving suppressed state material. No one knows for sure. But one image survives, posted anonymously on a dissident forum months later. It's a blurry photo of a ceremonial scroll, framed in simple bamboo, hanging on the wall of an unnamed mountain inn. In the corner, written in faded black ink. The ink dries faster these days. And beneath it, no signature. Only a seal pressed in red wax. The seal read, Letter 12. 12 letters. 12 voices trying to reach one man, and a system designed to never let them through. Maybe Xi Jinping never read them. Maybe he did. But what matters is this. Silence doesn't mean nothing was said. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, stories that hide beneath the headlines, subscribe to Hidden Xi. Your support helps us keep the whispers alive, before they disappear for good.